Hey, it's Tyler. Just got out of the shower, as you can probably tell, and I am hopefully back to making at least a string of videos here. I wanted to make a follow-up on my, I won't say system, but subsystem for mass combat that doesn't suck, and how that's been going in my home games when I've been able to run them. So consider this a sort of action report and examples of how you can do the stuff at home. I'm not going to go into the detail of all the characters that are involved, so I will use shorthand, maybe just a character's name, and what they're doing is important. Who the character is isn't important in this scenario, and how it ties into roleplay. I'll also mention some things where, when you're adding a new subsystem into a game that already exists, it can be tricky to adjust to that. So that's a consideration. It does have its drawbacks just inherently, right? Anytime you're adding complexity, you need to ask, what are you getting from that added complexity? Hopefully you're getting added depth too, and I think I am here. So when the player characters here playing Pathfinder 1st Edition enter the World Wound, which is this demonic portal on the material plane to the abyss that's has a constant stream of crusaders from the material plane, the humans and meta-humans, pouring in bodies constantly to try and deal with this, and that's untenable. And finally, at the last leg of this multi-year campaign I've been running, that's the big finale. They've, not necessarily out of the kindness of their own hearts, but because they have been tasked with doing such or die trying for crimes that they have committed. So they have entered with a small army of paladins and dwarven sky seekers and some other irregular troops that they've managed to recruit, some frost giants that they managed to pacify earlier in the campaign and actually get some cachet with. They had a very excellent diplomat with them at a certain point. They've entered this until they've reached a sort of midway point where the fabric between the abyss and the material are very unclear, and one of the cities that used to be in the material plane has been consumed by this demonic rift. And so it's full of demons and twisted human demon cultists. The party obviously sees this from, miles away, and has to stop and think about what they're going to do about this. They have the advantage of, it's possible that they haven't been seen, only at 150 or so strong, so they've got the early warning sign. And then I make just a perception check for the city. That's to represent all of the guards, all of any civilians, anybody that could be watching. That way you're not sitting there rolling for if you've got 20 guards, don't roll 20 perception checks. Just give a bonus, right? At, combine them together. In Pathfinder, for everyone assisting in a roll, you get +2 to that roll. If it would make sense that more people helping would help, and more eyes on something would help. The encampment city does notice this force, but they're too far away. They're out of range for their defenses to do anything. At a few miles, this isn't some super technologically advanced or high magic, fortress. It's the grunt forces of, it's the first real resistance that the party is running into. So at a few miles, they can just see and plan. So I'm thinking about that in the back of my mind. While the player characters are setting up their plan in character, they're talking, okay, we can send a couple of scouts forward to try and deal with this. We can, what are you guys going to do? Okay, we can set up in a forward operating base, an encampment to bring wounded back if the siege is starting to not go so great. And so While they're doing that, I as a GM am just sitting there listening and nodding, but I'm also preparing in my mind, okay, now we're probably going to need to use the mass combat rules sooner rather than later. So that helps smooth over that rough edge of going from mode to mode through not even necessarily narrative, but through just, I guess through narrative, yeah, you can hear that the characters are planning something. So narratively, I understand, oh, okay, now I need to switch brain from single combat to mass combat. Where the mechanics themselves come into play here, I do some, when I run, higher fantasy games like this, I run them like comic books. So I like the meanwhile fade. Now, don't overuse this, and don't literally do this all the time. Once or twice a session is plenty. When the party splits up and two characters go off to scout ahead, their divination wizard looks through their crystal ball and sees sort of what's going on and finds the blind spots in the fort, and then casts invisibility on two of the scouting party. The scouting party goes forth and starts looping around the fort, and I have them make a couple of rolls. They are, describing their action, how they're, how they're sneaking around. They're waiting for the guards' blind spots, looking for patterns in the patrol, looking for holes in the defenses. And this is a war-torn, dilapidated town, and the demons haven't reconstructed any of it. So, they're seeing all of this as they go down. But, it's a whole city and it's miles away, and they're on foot, supernaturally fast though they are. That's why they were chosen for the scouting roles. That's going to take a couple hours. So what do? Do you just zoom in on these two characters for 30 minutes, and then the other two characters in the party, or however many players you have, are just, sitting there twiddling their thumbs? No, you go, okay, you make a few rolls, maybe you skip turns a couple of times. You can zoom on these other characters for, 2 or 3 minutes. Then you have meanwhile, your forces have been setting up the encampment. The tents are pretty much finished constructing. There are the glints of spyglasses brimming on the turrets in the distance. Now a commotion of silhouettes coming up to the turrets, coming to look, shuffling around. And that's usually enough to say, without actually saying, okay, guys that stayed behind, it's your turn to do something now, right? And when that's not enough, what I can then do is have one of the tons of just random troops that's hanging out. I have a bunch of free NPCs that's just hanging there, and they don't suddenly appear from the void and have the player suddenly wondering, is that guy always there and he just forgot to tell us about it? And it's no, he wasn't always there. I needed something to happen, so I invented an NPC. No, that's one of the nice things about these mass combat scenarios is I can just have, some random privateer run up and go, hey, what are you doing here? We're getting ready to march on these people, and you've gotten quiet all of a sudden. And then they go, oh, okay, yeah, I see what's going on. This is what we're doing. And then they get that chance to rally it. Of course, if they still don't get, they don't have a good answer there, now the troops are going to start getting wary. But that's all it took, they're starting to go, okay, now let's get ready. Let's set up a perimeter. Let's start expanding our, get more scouting parties out here just to watch and see if they're demons. They're unpredictable. So they say something like, 20 of you go watch in case they send out for a preemptive strike. And I think, oh, that's a good idea. So I have the city again make a sense motive check as their troops are kind of looking through their spyglasses, trying to figure out, are they doing it? What is this? What's going on? Do we have time to defend, or should we strike now? And they decide, we should defend. We should. And they rolled quite poorly, so they made a big gamble and just massed all of their troops at the wall facing the party. Unbeknownst to them, of course, their elite scout strike forces have been circling around, finding the holes in their defenses, and pretty quickly realized, oh, there's a huge hole in this. They're just all there. All we have to do is circle around. They also found that these turrets had catapults haphazardly constructed up there somehow, and that would be a means of effective combat for either side were they to capture them. So they come back, they've formed a plan, the people at the forward base have been successfully threatening enough to ward off anything, and have gotten their troops into formations. They made some leadership roles, some diplomacy roles, charisma-based stuff, and tactician-based roles. I'll skip all of the not boring details, but I won't role play with myself here. You can imagine, the rallying the troops kind of thing before you march on a horrific demon fortress. They meet back together. Now we're fully in the mass combat thing, really now. They start marching forward. They have a chunk go, straight into clash, tip of the spear sort of thing, pikemen and whatnot. So I have them, the Scald barbarian who's, banging on his drum, making these war chants, and, occasionally dropping that to lead with his sword, make I can't remember exactly what check, but I make him make a check to control his forces. And of course, it's important to note, don't just make them roll randomly. Make them roll after they have said what they're doing. So he said he's doing all of this, then I make him roll. I'm not just assuming he's doing all of that. That force clashes, the morale doesn't break, it's pretty much a stalemate, which is exactly what the player characters and the players wanted. Meanwhile, the wizard and a few of the others has teleported a large chunk of their forces to the opposite side of the fortress. They begin deconstructing some of the houses for battlements. They're making battlements, and I was like, that's really cool. I did have one question, out of character question the whole session, which it had been months since we had played. So I let it slide, but it was kind of they asked which side of the house is the door on? I was kind of going, it doesn't really matter. One of the giants who teleported in here, just his head is poking up through the roof, and he just pushes the wall down, and wherever it's convenient it can be, you've got the tools to do this. And I was like, oh, yeah. So it didn't happen again after that, so no harm done there. They climb some of these turrets, they clear out the few people that are in there trying to move ammunition to some of the other the forward turrets. They didn't have time to do that. They start manning them. I have them make like an engineering roll to see if they can even operate these siege engines that they're trying to. Then the monk I've skipped her turn once or twice. And when you skip someone's turn, I think it's best to not say anything about it. That way it flows, really smoothly. It's assumed that they're doing nothing because they haven't said they're doing anything. And I wish I had been quicker to think about this in the moment. So I was thinking, it was one of those moments where I'm thinking as a GM, it's really tempting to ask, what are you doing? Come on, do something. And I was like, wait a minute, I can literally just ask that. She's in she's in a tight formation with 10 other people. I just have someone standing, hey, what do you do? And then she turns and goes, I don't have any ranged weapons. We're like 200 feet away from them at this point. I can't do anything. And he's like, oh, yeah, I hand her a spear, and then she chucks a spear, and, and so that became kind of a funny little moment, and then everything flowed smoothly from there. So they clash back and forth like this. While they're setting all of this up and the forces are clashing and they're, picking off some of the first, cultists that are coming to meet them, and these little flying dretches and other abominations, the turrets loose their first volley because they are making an attack on the strongest part of this fortress. It doesn't go off scot-free. These boulders from the catapults land squarely on a couple of formations and take out, a dozen or so of their men. And they almost, if they were not mostly fearless paladins, they would have routed then and there. It was a pretty horrific minute or two of carnage, but they powered through that, and then that was the only time that the demons and cultists had anything good happening to them. The party on the southern side of the city managed to turn those catapults around and start getting engaged in a crossfire. And I'm thinking, oh, that's sort of sketchy, because if you miss a bit, but they rolled plenty well. They selected a quite excellent small army. Those Dwarven Skyseekers were assisting with the engineering. They knew exactly what they were doing, rolled quite high, launched these catapults over here. They're engaging in battlements. There are some of the more intelligent demons are, they're self-serving, they're holed up. They're like, oh, just let those guys die out there. Who cares? I'm not going out there. And, eventually that's to their own detriment, because now instead of assisting their own army, they're 20 versus 100, and that's just a mop-up. And that was a total bloodbath once the party had gotten inside, and they didn't need to make rolls anymore. That was just these guys are totally at your mercy. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the flow of things. I hope that makes some sense and helps about it. As you're going back and forth, it's just make a check. That player makes a check, and then you just tally, oh, okay, was that a success or a failure? And then they get a d6. And then at the end of once all of your players have gone, once all of the opposing forces have gone, who succeeded more? They roll at an advantage. Then you see how many losses both sides has taken. And you keep going back and forth until one side routs. In the case of the demons, one, they couldn't rout. Two, demons and cultists don't really rout. They're fearless and insane. Well, not totally fearless, but they are insane. So, and they had no place to rout. They're stuck in their own city and surrounded. So that was just a total bloodbath for them. And you basically just run it as it logically makes sense, As long as you have active players that are, doing all of the stuff that I mentioned, then you as the GM really just have to sit there and go, oh, then that sounds like roll this, or there's no one over there, nobody's contesting you, that's an automatic success. There you go. Don't exactly use those words, just don't make them roll. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I've got other videos in the future. Hopefully that helps. I know some of you were asking specifically about this. Long and rambly. I haven't made one of these videos in a while, and I'm also trying to remember things that happened like a month ago in my game. So yeah, this may end up terrible. Sorry if it does, and I'll remake the video. Let me know what other things you'd like to see in the future. I'm going to have a video on revolvers and, in general, things that seem worse on paper. The sort of, why would I ever pick that? Why would I ever pick a revolver when the semi-auto pistol is, the numbers are all bigger on it in the RPG? The hidden effects of different equipment, if you will. And probably some more HEMA stuff. I'm teaching at an indoor school now, so usually in the summer it's really slow because who wants to get in, even not in historical gear, any amount of protective equipment when it's 110 outside is miserable. I don't want to do that, and I teach it, so that's a problem right away. So I may do some more filming. Not sure of HEMA stuff. I'm not sure that it will happen. Just not sure when. So, yep. Thanks for watching. If you did, see ya.